All right, here we go. This is the System Failure Podcast, number 61.
61, and it sure is a historic moment, or it feels that way. The 2024 election, finally in the can. And, just by way of a brief introduction to that, Brian, we found ourselves down in New York City for election eve, did we not?
We sure did.
Yeah.
Well, we did make a pilgrimage down there to see David Gilmour from the Pink Floyd.
Yeah, you bought us some tickets to Gilmour, the guitar man to Pink Floyd. And it was, we went back-to-back nights, Monday and Tuesday night. And of course, this man being the guitar man for Pink Floyd, what would you say? Is Gilmour one of the top 5 guitarists in the world in 1975? And now it's 2024 and he's still making the rounds, shuffling out there on stage and working his guitar, creating these sonic lattice works of exquisite beauty for the audience to behold, huh?
I mean, well, I do respect like Taylor Swift, but David Gilmour's up there like playing without a click track and making real music. All right, we'll just do a brief concert review here. And then we can get into the politics.
All right.
Okay. But I mean, his album Luck and Strange is about like the anomaly of like the baby boomer era and how that seemed to be good and how like the wheels are kind of coming off. And well, I mean, the concert was just crazily good, right? All right, like I saw David Gilmour like in 2006, right? And he was playing with Rick Wright, and they were like playing Echoes. Rick Wright's the other guy from Pink Floyd. He's dead now, the keyboardist. And then we saw him in 2015 at Madison Square Garden.
Was it 15 or 16?
I believe it was 15.
15, okay.
And, he was still playing with the same band as before, minus Rick Wright. And it was kind of a rehash of the Pulse tour from 1994, which there's a DVD of. And it was a little artistically uninspired. And so this tour, I would say, the Luck and Strange and the sort of acknowledgement of things being played out maybe, or like maybe an era of positivity, having been trampled on, I suppose, by just the way that things have unfolded over the past several decades. But it does contrast though, because I think this election's like crazily exciting. And I know that David Gilmour is not excited about the Donald, and I guess neither is Roger Waters, the other Pink Floyd member. But I think I do have some optimism about politics. Although hearing David Gilmour play like some political songs like A Great Day for Freedom or In Any Tongue, and having him belt out some crazy guitar solo about the horrors of war or whatever is like pretty wild. So yeah, it was pretty awesome.
The new Gilmour album, Luck and Strange, is pretty good. It has a nice noir feel, maybe like some late Leonard Cohen. And everyone should check it out if you have a chance.
Yes, sir.
And by way of pivoting to politics, I will say that when our Uber driver picked us up in front of MSG on Tuesday night, I saw that he was quickly trying to hide the fact that he was listening to the Joe Rogan Experience on Spotify from his newly picked up passengers, meaning me and Brian. But the young lad, Ahmed was his name, big shout out to Ahmed, was ebullient over the election results that were starting to filter in the hour after the concert. And he was just so excited. He was just talking rapidly, nonstop about the election and politics and podcasts, and he just was going. And it sure seemed like it seemed impossible to imagine that 4 or 5 days earlier that the Donald had held this Nazi rally. That is this way. Like the newspapers were all like, "Yes, this is comparable," as if nothing has happened at MSG since 33, whenever that rally was. And it seemed impossible to imagine that there'd been the excitement from Ahmed, the Uber driver, and the vibe of the crowd. It made it impossible to imagine that there had been a Nazi rally at MSG a few days earlier. It sure was quite a juxtaposition to the way that the media painted the mood there in Midtown Manhattan. And so that really, I think, brings up the political angle. We definitely, we're remiss not to mention Pink Floyd on the System Failure podcast, and it's always good to touch that base. But I want to dedicate this episode 61 of the System Failure podcast, to those people out there who voted for not the Donald and are now deeply concerned that we're facing like we've elected Hitler for ourselves or something like that. I talked to a few of these people that I know personally over the past week or so. Yeah, but I've seen way more than that online. People posting things on people I don't know posting things on social media like Reddit. Man, it sure seems like it seems to me that I understood in 2016 when they denied Bernie. Like for me, my big problem in 2016 was just being buried by student debt. You know, I was in my like early 30s, and I was looking at being in debt and unable to get out of it. I was looking at being in that state until my 50s, and I was trying to figure out how I was ever going to fit in with American society, and I just had nothing whatsoever to. If I couldn't solve the student debt problem, then I might as well like become a partisan in the hills, you know, digging up railroad tracks and like bending the ties like Sherman used to do during the Civil War. Like, you know, you have no skin in the game with society whatsoever. And so I knew in 2016 when it came out that Donna Brazile, the chair of the DNC, had been cheating and giving the debate questions in the primary to Hillary, the ways in which the Democratic Party cheated to deny Bernie both in 16 and 20 are obvious and well documented. We don't need to go over them here. I think everyone understands that the Democratic Party denied their populist. You know, there was in 2016 there was a huge populist uprising, and on the right, the Republicans, they couldn't prevent the uprising from taking over their party, but the Democrats succeeded therein and were able to strangle that baby in its crib artificially, and they did this in 16 and in 20. And so now here we are in 24, and their candidates are not voted for. They're not tested. They're installed, and people aren't voting for them. I mean, you must have seen that between 12 and 15 million fewer people came out to vote for Kamala than Biden. I mean, that's insane. There are a couple million people. The Donald got a couple million fewer votes in the grand sense than he did in 2020. But then Kamala got like 12 million fewer votes than Biden. That tells you right there. That really tells the story. So anyway, in 2016 and in 2020, when the Dems were cheating and destroying any possibility of, for me personally, to have to have any kind of participation in American society, I knew then that the Democrats were going to have to lose if they were ever going to. If their corruption is rewarded with victories at the ballot box, then we will never. The Democratic Party has no incentive to reform itself, and only repeated Democratic defeats have the power to change the way that the Democrats run their politics, and namely that we need them to represent actual working people and not also vote the same donor, also represent and vote for the policies requested and desired by the donor class, the same people that vote that support the Republican races. Right? I think that what we are going to have to do, folks, like those of us who are lefties, right? In this case, I'm a lefty who's really glad that the Donald won, because we can't have our side be corrupt, and we can't have a wolf in sheep's clothing. Like the wolf we can just about deal with, but a wolf in sheep's clothing, that's the one. We can't have it be the wolf versus the wolf in sheep's clothing. We need an actual sheep up there representing the working class interests. And if we don't have it, like it is important. If the Democrats can win elections while being a wolf in sheep's clothing, then we'll never get the real sheep that we deserve. To represent us democratically. Right. And so for me, for this lefty voter who is, I'm further to the left politically than virtually anyone I know. My economics are hardcore left. And so for me, we need to have some Democratic losses so we can purge the corruption out the party. And the reason that we need to have that is nothing less than to prevent the utter economic collapse of our civilization in the near term, in terms of capitalism, right? I mean, we talk about this on this podcast all the time, but we have a 2-horse race on whether it's going to be industrial capital creating so much technology as to make workers no longer all that relevant to the production process, and then that'll all be great for the owners of the means of production, those who own the institutions that provide the goods and services for society. It'll be great for them because with good enough technology, they can fire all their workers and keep all the profits for themselves. You know, the employers don't love deducting from their profits the wages of their employees. But ultimately, when the owners of the means of production fire all of their employees because they have technology to replace them, they're going to find in very short order that there's no one to buy their products because all the other business owners will have done the same thing. And then, of course, there's the finance capital prophecy of doom, in which the banks systematically create more debt than actual currency. And so there's always more debt in the economy than there are dollars to pay the debt. And so therefore, every once in a while, we have to have a recession and an economic downturn, and ultimately we have to have periodic debt jubilees, or the alternative to that is to have all of the wealth concentrate in ever smaller amount of hands until eventually you get such wealth inequality that the vast majority of people have zero incentive to participate in society. It's what killed the Roman Empire. Right? A tiny number of people had all the wealth in that society, and everyone else stopped defending it from the barbarian hordes at the gates, and that was that for Roman civilization on the Italian peninsula. So the point here is that there is a fundamental problem with the capitalist system. It is inherently unstable because it trends towards wealth inequality. And we're blowing up wealth inequality just like we did in the Gilded Age, portrayed in the movie Titanic, that came prior to the 1929 stock market crash, the 1930s, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the New Deal, opposition to the New Deal from the wealthiest echelons of American society, culminating in the business plot in the mid 30s, which was a plot to overthrow FDR and replace him with a fascist dictator. The only reason this plot failed was because the consortium of wealthy folks, notables included the Bush family and the Standard Oil, Carnegie and the Standard Oil crew, and the wealthiest, the American oligarchy. You can look up the business plot on Wikipedia. It's not like some conspiracy theory. It's not remotely controversial. It's just not taught in our schools, because learning that our elite work and plan together in such tight concert that they planned a fascist coup in the 30s, that just doesn't fit into what the powers that be want regular school children to understand about American history. Well, of course, 4-star Marine Corps General Smedley Butler blew the whistle on the business plot. And as a result, FDR was able to he didn't put these people in jail, but he did have the leverage to force them to pay for the New Deal, which at the time was colloquially known as the Soak the Rich Act, because, when in a state of an extreme depression, when tax receipts have all but collapsed and economic activity has slowed to, barely a pulse, there's no tax receipts coming in, so the government has no choice. The only place they can get money for a New Deal is by hiking up taxes on the rich. And indeed, that was the way that American society operated through the 50s and the 60s, right up until the 70s, when we began the neoliberal economics, which are the calling card of our current era. And the neoliberal economics is essentially, we're just going to drop tax rates on the wealthy and cancel the welfare and social safety net installed during the New Deal era, and this is trickle-down economics, right? If we give the wealthy more money, then it'll eventually trickle down to everyone else, which it hasn't happened. What we've seen is a massive explosion in wealth inequality in this country since the 1970s, and the Donald's administration is one populist response to that explosion in wealth inequality. And what we need is the other populist response from the left, and it has been canceled by the Democratic Party operatives in particular. And so for me, seeing the Democrats lose these races, so the other aspect of this is because the Democrats have been so feckless, and because they've completely abandoned working class and middle class voters as our middle class dries up completely before all of our very eyes. We're now in a place where folks like the Zoomers aren't going to be able to move into houses, right? They're just not going to be able to afford a house. And obviously, all of our groceries bills have gone up 30% in 4 years. It's like we need to have the correct policy, the correct economic policy prescriptions are those of the hard left, like the Bernie Sanders policies of rounding up wealth money from the rich where it's pooling up, right? It's like if you have blood pooling in one limb of a patient, right, you've got to drain that blood or redistribute it or get it to circulate through the system, because blood circulates in a circulatory system the way that money circulates in an economy. And at least, literally, the only way to the less and less relevant workers become to the production process, the less we're all going to be able to bargain for at the bargaining table for employees for wages. And so the only way to keep the flow of money and the flow of goods and services moving is going to be to take money where it's pooling and seed it to where it's needed. And these are the Bernie Sanders policies. They're often called socialist policies, but they're not. They're classical liberal policies. As we talked about with the great Dr. Michael Hudson here in August, the foundation thinkers of capitalism, the Adam Smiths and Ricardos and John Stuart Mills, all advocated for getting rid of the old legacy feudal system by supplying workers with their health care and their housing and their food using economies of scale, and then passing that savings along to entrepreneurs so that folks building new factories during the Industrial Revolution would have a cheap labor force to utilize to carry out that Industrial Revolution. And so these are the only policies that can keep capitalism stable. It's either Bernie Sanders' policies or we head for total collapse. And these are the options. And so I think that what system failure is a specific set of a specific view of history and a specific view of economics that is very, very, I think it's ultimately very hopeful. I just don't think that there's any way that we're not all going to get through this together. And then my final point is just the size of the magnitude of the fecklessness of the Democratic Party is related to the size of the lie they had to create about Donald Trump. I think the Donald is more like a buffoon and less like Hitler. He's more like P.T. Barnum, the carnival, or a carnival barker, than he is, a right-wing strongman. And so I just think that the Democrats not wanting to anger their donor base and therefore handcuffed and unable to offer the Bernie Sanders-esque pro-working class, pro-middle class policies that are the only way to prolong American capitalism any further than it already has gone. The fact that the Democrats have been totally derelict in their duty and to the working middle class means that they have to create a lie that is in similar proportion to their fecklessness. So they've created a massive illusion that the Donald is like is the second coming of Hitler, and they have no way to let the pressure out of that tire now that they've lost the election, right? Because their thing was, well, what we can say, we can't offer the working or middle class any hope or any kind of actual economic redress of their grievances because we're being paid by the donor class. But what we can do is assure everyone using media outlets that were previously credible media outlets. What we can do is assure everyone that it's the end of the world if we don't win, right? They put out this lie that it's the end of the line. If we don't win, it's an existential crisis. And they have no way to walk that back now that they could. Not even that lie. Like, people don't believe the media anymore. People understand these folks lied us into Iraq and Afghanistan, and that they are remarkably incurious about Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, the list goes on. I mean, the whole COVID era, just the lies spouted from the mainstream media have destroyed. They've just immolated their own credibility and sacrificed themselves on this altar, trying to deliver a win to the Democratic Party without the Democratic Party having to actually do anything for its constituency. So for me, I see great hope in this. I do not believe. I just see that I can understand why someone would be folks who take the media seriously. These are like serious people with ties on TV telling you that the second coming of Hitler is at hand. I can completely understand why that would be a terrifying situation, but you just have to realize that the Democrats played, and the hilarious bit is this is not the first time they played this card. In 2016, they also told us that it was the end of the world. They didn't win the election, and of course, it turned out to not be true at all. And it's not any more true in 2024 than it is in 2016. So that is a long way of saying that I, the most hardcore lefty I know, am delighted by the outcome of the election. It's not that I really support any of the Donald's policies. I can't think of one that I actually agree with, but I think it's critical that our Democrats not be allowed to win elections when they are, on the one hand, giving lip service to the working class and middle class, but behind the scenes working to continue to undermine us. So I could not possibly be more encouraged. Brian, I wonder what your take is on the final take is on the 2024 election.
Well, when Joe Biden got elected going into the winter, he put out some statement about how, the unvaccinated are in for a winter of, doom and gloom and death. And then the vaccinated are in for, happiness. And, well, I think similarly, going into this winter, if you have an agile mind and don't consume, the mainstream propaganda or whatever, you're probably in for a very happy winter. And if you swallow what they're selling, you might be in for a rough one. I mean, I think what you're going to see is... if you go on Reddit, it's probably going to be doom and gloom and a disaster. And if you go on Twitter, there's going to be lots of positivity and kumbaya and whatnot. But in any case, obviously we don't like the Donald because we think he's we're not one of these the Donald is like the return of Jesus or whatever. We're not out there wearing diapers or I don't know. We're not like MAGA people, but it just is exciting. Just obviously the Trump is Hitler narrative is crazy. and it got defeated in this election, and that like just no longer works. And so it's the truth like kind of really prevailed in this election, which is exciting for if you value the truth.
The mainstream media is like responsible, I think, for creating a mini health crisis for like millions of people with this. Like, you can't go on TV and, it's like crying wolf about Hitler. That is no joke. You can't be on TV doing that, and especially have no way to unwind it if the milquetoast unelected propped up candidate doesn't win. Right now, they just got no way to walk that back. You can just leave people in a state of a minor mental health crisis, because for a lot of people, CNN is reality. That is bedrock reality. It's where the rubber meets the road. So I think for the next 4 years, what we have here is a major opportunity as lefties who are rooting for the Donald. Right? We have got to not let the idea, like what we can't have is the Democrats go like even further to the center. I don't know what their plan is right now. I mean, their plans since at least 2016 and probably even older have been shown to have been ruined by this election result. So I wonder if they're going to try to double down on performative window dressing for the middle and lower classes, and continue to just not do any of the Bernie Sanders policies, which are so desperately needed. All right, we got 4 years to win this argument. Our podcast has got to be a part of it, Brian. We got to convince the Democrats not to accept non-economic platitudes from the Democratic Party. Like, we need hardcore we need Bernie Sanders policies, and we need a party who represents those policies in the marketplace of ideas to get the vote share to support them. I think, it really goes back to, you can see polls showing RFK beating the Donald from July of this year. I can put those in the show notes. I can show you 2020 polls showing Bernie Sanders beating the Donald in head-to-head, right? The way that the Democrats are going to win elections is by embracing Bernie Sanders-style policies. They're going to have to jettison their corporate paymasters. We cannot have this kind of fecklessness in our political system. So we have got to spread the good word wherever we can, on Reddit, on Twitter, here on the podcast, by writing system failure essays every week. We've got to spread the message that if you continue down this path of widening wealth inequality, that you really will get like scary situations, and that there's only one way back from this. We learned this lesson already in the 1930s. We can do whatever we need to as a country, and we just can't let propagandists confuse us and blind us, and that really seems to be a big part of the negative feelings in the aftermath of the 2024 election. Now they're entirely based on, they arise from a media apparatus that's owned by the same corporate oligarchy that's trying to continue to increase its share of the American economy at the rest of all of our expenses.
Well, I mean, what you're going to see the Democratic Party do, I think, is, they're going to have to come to the negotiating table, and they're going to be trying to see, like, how few concessions they can make to the working class.
Yeah. We can't let them do that. Yeah, they have to make all the concessions.
Yeah, well, we have to come in and make, big demands and, be shrewd negotiators. Do
you think the Dems will hold a primary in 28? They held a primary in 20, right? But they cheated and installed. Like, what was the story in 2020? Right? In the days before Super Tuesday, Barack Obama made all the phone calls and got everyone to drop out the race except for Biden and Bernie. Bernie, obviously, but also Elizabeth Warren. Right? Warren does not get a call from Obama, so she stays in on Super Tuesday and thus splits the economic populist vote between Warren and Sanders. It's a clever trick. Biden was like in 5th place or something like that after Iowa, New Hampshire, in Nevada, right? It was in Super Tuesday. Biden was sitting in like 5th, something, and he got like Pete Buttigieg to drop out and Amy Klobuchar to drop out, and all of the controlled corporate candidates to drop out, and leaving only Warren and Sanders to split the remaining. So yeah, that's how they won in 20, playing dirty. It does seem to me that we should be encouraged by the fact, like in this election, the Donald. His policy prescriptions notwithstanding, the Donald represents anger at the establishment, and Kamala Harris represented doubling down the establishment. And everyone hates the establishment. So we the Democrats need that revolutionary message. We need that anti-establishment message. And I mean, you're just not going to get that from the sitting vice president, a milquetoast DEI candidate who just it was so unappealing she couldn't muster a single electoral vote during the primary in 2020. Right, just one of the worst candidates. That's what I think. I think that we should. I don't think that the second, I don't think the 75th president is going to be any worse than the 77th. That is to say, I don't think that the Donald's next upcoming 4 years is going to be any better or worse than 2016. And, maybe if we can get RFK to fix the poisoned food system, it could get even better.
Well, hopefully they get in there and like really expose some corruption and kind of, destroy the status quo. They like stab that, demon in its cold black heart.
I did note a distinct lack of swamp draining in the Donald's first 4 years. It doesn't give me a ton of hope. Like the Donald's first 4 years make me very sure that we're not going to see anything like Hitler, but it also makes me feel like we're not going to see the sorts of change that we need. We really need the Democrats to come in and get rid of the regulatory capture at FDA and CDC, for example. I would love it. I hope I'm proven wrong. I hope that RFK really becomes like the attack dog and brings some actual accountability to these moribund authorities. But it's sure been. I'm sure used to just being disappointed every time on the political front. So kind of bracing for that again here with.
Yeah, I mean, if the Donald is ineffectual for the next 4 years, that'll be good for the establishment. That would be bad news. And to that end, it's probably a good thing that Trump lost in 2020 because he didn't have Elon Musk and RFK with him then, and those people are likely to cause some change.
And Tulsi, there's some people that I definitely like that have come out behind, but it's all of the rebellion people, right? People that used to be part of the mainstream media, like Tucker Carlson, that have now turned on the mainstream media and are with the Donald. Obviously, Elon Musk is a great example there. But I do think that I'd love to think the Donald's. My expectation is that we'll just have 4 more years of just the same we had from 16 through 20. I expect things will be exactly the same as Gaza. I don't think that either Biden or Harris or the Donald is going to make any changes. We're still going to have ongoing genocide in Gaza.
Well, also when the Donald was elected the first time back in 2016, it was a lot of like the Donald subreddit and QAnon. Which was all just a little bit crazy. And it was a lot of saying that Donald was accomplishing a lot, yet nothing actually happening.
Yeah. And you can see people online that'll post a list of the Donald's accomplishments and make it seem, and I look at those and when I think of the tax cut for the wealthy as the Donald's one and only legislative accomplishment, I don't know, I can't remember anything else he did. People also post lists of things Biden did, but you're like, dude, you stepped in and broke a railroad union strike, and then 2 months later had a catastrophic disaster in Palestine, East Palestine, Ohio. It's like, sorry, that's not nothing. What your window dressing is not good enough. What we need is like Bernie Sanders-esque, policies. I hope we see it, Brian. I mean, maybe things will be different this time, but I'm not holding my breath. And the importance of the Donald winning in my book is just that the Democrats cannot be rewarded for their strategy of canceling out the Democratic voters, going around the Democratic voters. They can't be allowed to get away with that. So even though the Donald is reloaded with RFK and Musk and Gabbard, I still feel like we're 4 years behind where we should be. We're 12 years behind where we should be if the Democrats would just have let Bernie through in 16, right? They would have crushed the Donald. We never would have had the Donald presidency. We could be living in a very different America, if that had happened. It didn't, and so in 20, it would have been nice if they got punished again. But my concern here is that their narrow victory in 20, will make the Democratic Party bosses try the same strategy again in 28. And that's what we got to spend the next 4 years. We got to make this podcast into a game changer, Brian, and convince everyone that the way that you defeat the populist right is with the populist left, and that there is no way to defeat the populist right without the populist left, and that that's the direction we need to be heading in.
Well, I think I'm overall optimistic about the future, and I think if they accomplish nothing, the Donald, then it's really bad news. But otherwise, I think like J.D. Vance seems like an intelligent person, although I feel it makes me cringe saying it. But he just does sound reasonably intelligent.
Yeah, he seems like like an impressive person. He's at least thought of, he's at least been through. He has thoughts on issues.
And there's Vivek as well. Seems reasonably intelligent. There's obviously like support for that, enough support for that kind of message to prevail in an election. So, but yeah, they have to get in there and do something. and I guess I'm cautiously optimistic that it's going to happen. But yeah, I mean the like the neocon beast is not one that's going to be easily slayed. So yeah, it's taken many years, but this seems like I don't know, probably the best way. Like, just obviously, if the Donald had won in 2020, I just don't think we'd be getting I'm much more optimistic about what this administration can do than what would have happened if he was reelected in 2020. I think it would have been a lot more spinning of the wheels and MAGA nonsense and whatnot. So I don't know, got a real chance here for positive change. But yeah, I mean, if you're like a left-leaning person who doesn't like the Donald, I mean, you should be excited, right? Because the Democratic Party probably has to come to the table and negotiate, like we were talking about there. How were your not the Donald friends, like did you tell them that, and how did they handle it?
That's usually so what I can offer, what I offer on system failure is, what the essays are, is just this this view of history with some important facts put back in, and so I don't quite know how to. That's a real challenge, right? People text me looking for my take on the situation because they're like, well, sorry, so Hitler's been elected. I mean, this person who's a lefty seems happy that Hitler's been elected. What is that? Can you make me feel better? But I really can't make them feel better unless they believe me, right? Because if I tell them, oh, the news media is filled with lies, or you can't. I realize that the New York Times says there's a Nazi rally on at MSG, but like, you can't believe that. You have to recognize it. See, but when people, it's like belief is a strange thing. Just what's on CNN seems real to people, and what comes out of my mouth seems like crackpot conspiracy theories. Even though you can look up the business, you can go on Wikipedia, look at the business plot, it'll come right up. It's not what normally people hear under the history heading, and so it doesn't feel familiar or right to them. So that's a good. I don't really know. What I do is try to point things out. Like, hey, Bernie beats the Donald in every poll. It's like never even close. We had all this polling from 2016 showing that Bernie is way ahead of the Donald. Or you can say, hey, look, the Clintons, they rose to power on this this Democratic Leadership Council, which was not the labor unions. It was in fact corporations creating the Clinton movement, and their crowning achievement, the repeal of Glass-Steagall in '99, set the stage for the 2008 financial crisis we have today, that we're still feeling the aftershock of today. So I don't know. All I can do is just try to point things out to people that they can easily Wikipedia. And I think I'll have to get better at it. I'll have to refine my shtick over the next 4 years. Get better at just painting a context where, yeah, the insanity you're seeing in the New York Times is a direct result of the Democrats cheating on behalf of corporate candidates to box out the priorities of the middle and lower class. That's the worldview that I think is comforting once you adopt it. But I don't know how to make that worldview seem more authentic than what's on CNN.
Well, I guess what I would be saying is like, well, you must have noticed that Kamala was like, she just took no substantive positions on anything, and that the Donald did not set up any concentration camps for the Jews.
Yeah, that's one I did. I think we can use 2016 through 2020 as a case study. Did the Donald, or 2017, the Donald's administration, 17 through 21. Was it concentration camps?
I guess the thing is I think that people probably, just like with the COVID and the lockdowns, and just like with the nonstop bluster and nonsense on CNN, and like the constant fear mongering like on NPR, they probably made it feel like Hitler was in charge, even though that wasn't actually the case. So,
you think people look back at 17 through 21 as this dark era? I mean, just really nothing really happened. There's nothing really notable.
The relentless onslaught of the media was certainly what's unfortunate, and like the end of social media being like at all. Like not complete brain rot,
What they got busted though, right? Everyone knows about the Twitter files, do they not? Everyone knows that that social media was heavily censored during the COVID era, right? Do they not know?
I mean, I don't know. For me, I definitely know those things, and I don't know. I just kind of use the Reddit and Twitter anyway, and it's just terrible. You still end up being addicted to your phone and doom scrolling through like obvious garbage. because that's the nature of the beast. So
Just want to have people notice that, so do you think people would agree that it wasn't, that 16 through 20 wasn't, or 17 through 21 wasn't an era of concentration camps?
I think it's easy to create that. It's easy to create the feeling somehow that we were under some kind of existential crisis, especially with all the constant impeachments and the felonies and all this stuff. I think they created that illusion somehow. Is probably the hypnotic sway of they were trying to do, like the sleight of hand trick kind of on the general populace.
Yeah. Well, my two favorite examples of sleight of hand are abortion, right, where Obama ran on codifying Roe v. Wade in '08, matriculated, I said 1,000 times in this pod now, matriculated into majorities in both houses of Congress, and proceeded to not do a single thing on Roe v. Wade because it's one of the few political footballs that doesn't involve the balance sheets of the donor class. Like, all of Bernie Sanders' policies would negatively impact the balance sheets of the donor class. But abortion, well, you can scream out abortion all day. That doesn't worry the big banks. But so that's why they can't retire that political football by actually codifying Roe v. Wade into law, right? They have to keep it in a nexus where it could be brought out in case of emergency. You can break glass and bust out that abortion issue if people are catching wise that you've been bamboozling the middle and lower classes. So that's an example, right? Obama runs on abortion, codifying abortion, does nothing, leaving daylight for Roe v. Wade to be overturned in 18 or whenever that was. And the other one is the student loan forgiveness. I know that people from debtcollective.com, they had representatives in the White House explaining to the Biden administration, you cannot base student loan forgiveness in the 2022 HEROES Act. It doesn't give you the powers you need. You need to use as a legal precedent the 1965 Higher Education Act. That does give the president broad authority to cancel student loan debts. But they didn't. They went with the rationale they knew could be canceled at the Supreme Court level, and that's exactly what happened. It's frustrating to read on debtcollective.org. People are like, yeah, we were in communication with the Biden administration. They definitely knew that this was all a decoy. They could seem like they were doing something for student loan debtors, but not actually have to forgive any of the debts owed to the big banks. See how it works? It's like that's emblematic of the way that the Democratic Party has operated dishonestly, and that if that wins them elections, then this country is just going to go back to feudalism, right? We're just going to have a few people own everything, and the rest of us are all going to have to rent it from them at whatever price they demand from us. And that's the reality. And that would be great for the small number of people who own everything, but for the rest of us, it would be a dystopia. And so I think those two examples, abortion and then student loan forgiveness, really highlight the Democratic Party and their utter lack of ability to actually address their utter unwillingness to actually address the issues that affect the lower and middle class. So, man, yeah, we got to make our voices a part of the chorus that forces the Democratic Party to actually represent their constituency instead of pretending to represent their constituency.
Well, I guess what people need to do is Bernie Sanders was making some statements after the election.
I saw his tweet.
Some I told you so's.
Yeah.
And what we need to do is not fall for when Bernie Sanders starts getting popular support or someone like him, we need to not call him a sexist or something.
Yes,
what did Hillary Clinton say that overhauling the banks isn't going to stop sexism or something?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, breaking up the big banks won't stop sexism. You're like, oh my God. Oh my, that right there is the Democratic Party in a nutshell, eh?
Yeah, we need to get an immune system for that kind of nonsense and just not be so easily swayed by the word sexist or racist.
We need more podcasts with actual economic literacy like this one.
And I guess it's just scary to get out there and, if you say stuff like that, people will accuse you of being a sexist and a racist. I don't really know who these people are, but it's just, if you have some position.
Yeah. That position that's what gets articulated by the corporate donors, right? That you have to only focus on identity politics, and if you dare focus on class issues, then that makes you some kind of an ist, a racist or a sexist. Some kind of an ist that's the worst thing you can possibly be, according to modern American mythology. If you think of modern America as having really coagulated in the post-World War II era, then our foundational myth is World War II. And the defeat of racism in the guise of the Third Reich. And so, when I were growing up in the 90s, the worst thing you could ever be is a racist. Everyone was scrambling not to be a racist. And that conversational artifact has been leveraged to great effect by corporate donors to silence a critique of the Democrats' poor performance on economic issues. So we can't allow that, right? That is a loser. That must be a loser every time. It's really too bad we allowed it to be a winner in 2020. That was a hit to my morale when that happened. But it must be a loser every time. And so that's why I'm glad that it is a loser this time. What we need is a real Democratic Party, not the aforementioned sheep in wolf's clothing.
Yes, sir.
And now there is the context of the ticking time bomb, right? The economic collapse that's coming that we didn't deal with the issue in 2008. And in 2020, we also didn't deal with the issue, but we printed a crazy amount of money and created this whole synthetic fake economy to paper over the fact that the economy had been locked down. And we still haven't figured that out, right? I mean, I wished I had the numbers with me. I didn't think to, but there's a huge transfer of wealth during the COVID era. You've seen this, Brian, like hundreds of billions of dollars of wealth accumulated at the top at the expense of everyone else. Like that's what the COVID era really. Every time we have an economic collapse, that's the solution. Just give a whole bunch of money to the rich people to fix their balance sheets and abandon everyone else. I mentioned the two prophecies of doom at the top of the pod: the industrial. The technology canceling out the relevance of employers to the industrial production process, and then the way we make our debt-based currency, where we create more every time we create a dollar, we create a dollar plus X worth of debt, and so we're rapidly hurtling towards an economic cliff, and all of the harbingers of doom are here, just like they were during the fall of Rome and the collapse of medieval society. Of course, we've had a brand new piece of communication technology, like the bound book or the printing press and the internet, and we've had a plague like the Antonine Plague during the fall of Rome, or the Black Death during the late medieval period. Now we're starting to see the crisis of faith in the authorities. You know, people, that's what the Donald really is. People no longer believe what the authorities are telling them. Like the emperor has no clothes realization, the tipping point moment. It's happening. It's happened for some people and happening for others, and still to happen for a third contingent of the population. But I mean, we are rapidly heading there. And once people lose faith in the authorities, then the revolution will be on in earnest. Right? And I think a big part of the thing that's going to finally push the majority over the cliff is the total collapse of the neoliberal economic paradigm. And that is like a mathematical. We notice that the interest on our national debt is exceeding defense expenditures this year. You really start to say, "Oh, we're awarding more and more of our national wealth to to an ever shrinking population of people, and we're doing that at an accelerating rate." You know, the way we papered over that since the 80s was by expansion of credit. You know, if workers don't have money to buy goods and services in the marketplace because they've been fired and replaced by technology, then we'll just extend them credit to keep the system running, right? But obviously every category of debt now stands at a record level. And sovereign debt I just mentioned, but credit card debt, auto debt, student loan debt, real estate, if it's debt, it's at a record level. And we're going to have a major reckoning with that in the very near future. And if we don't, then the economy will seize up and completely stop functioning. and we'll go back to feudalism, and that was the choice the Romans made. Right? Rather than sharing their wealth with more than just the oligarchy, they just kept on doubling down on their policies until you end up with the Dark Ages. You end up with a few extremely wealthy families and fortified homes in the middle of vast farming tracts worked by other people. We're on our way if we don't. We're on our way to a massive economic collapse if we don't wake up and start using the Bernie Sanders policies to extend the lifetime of capitalism, so that we can, at least prepare for some kind of a transition on down the road. But in the near term, we are. If you look at the Fed lowered interest rates again this week, but if you look at the price of debt, let's use the 10-year Treasury note, right? The benchmark figure for debt, the cost of debt that all the mortgage lending rates are based on, right? That 10-year T-note, the cost of those, the percent that the rich people who buy those bonds demand as a price has been going up and not down since the Fed lowered rates on September the 15th, which is really odd. You would think that lowering the overnight lending rate would also lower the benchmark borrowing rate, the 10-year T-note, but instead, investors are demanding more to hold U.S. debt and not less. That's really ominous. I mean, we really are. It's easy to lose focus in all the fireworks surrounding the election, but we are rapidly hurtling towards an economic cliff, and that's one of the major themes of the System Failure podcast, eh, Brian?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty much the economic analysis right there. It's going to be a 4-year fight to reclaim the soul of the Democratic Party, and we should be a part of that fight on System Failure, Brian. That's where my mind is at. I feel cautiously optimistic in the days after the election, and it's my sincerest wish that I could seed that cautious optimism in the minds of all the folks who are really worried about the rise of the Donald because of what they read in the New York Times. It's like, yeah, man, I totally get it, and I wish that I could. I just wish I could wave my magic wand and put my worldview in other people's heads so that they won't have this like mini crisis of mental health post election.
I guess I think since we've been doing the podcast, it's a lot of we've had to have a lot of doom and gloom about the establishment, and so I guess I'm hopeful that instead of this negative reinforcement, we'll get to do some positive reinforcement as maybe good things happen.
I hope we can cheer on RFK. I mean, it really is obvious when you go to Europe and eat the food over there. We talked to the lovely Tracy. Her friend came to dinner with us on Tuesday night, and everyone you ask, she'd just gotten back from Europe. Do you agree the food over here is not like the food over there? The potatoes here are different. The tomatoes here are different. They have no vitamins. They're translucent. They're mealy. They're non-nutritious. There's just something about it. Every time I go to Europe, I end up eating worse than I do normally. Inevitably, maybe you have beer or maybe you have something fried. I'm not like watching what I eat when I'm in Europe, but still the weight falls off my body. I feel better. There is something seriously wrong with the food here in America. And unless you travel, it's really hard to tell. You would just never know. But maybe we can cheer on RFK, rounding up the corrupt bureaucrats who head our regulatory agencies and actually getting some oversight over the massive apparatus of food production and distribution that's killing us all. I mean, we really do have a major public health crisis on in this country right now, and it's crazy that only RFK is talking about it.
We sure do. Yeah. All right.
Well, so I guess I will just once again, as a way of saying adios to our dear listeners till next week. I'll just once again sound a note of cautious, positive optimism. Really, I think we are all going to be much better off in the long run for the fact that Donald won this election. So I hope to convince many of you of that who don't already think so, and then coming weeks and months. So. Yeah, and I think also at the end of the show, Brian, is usually the moment when I invite our dear listeners to log on to nop.substack.com to find some weekly essays about the future, about the past, and where you can get a weekly email sent to your inbox, which has a little piece of history that takes 5 or 10 minutes to read, and all cobbled together, those pieces of history create a mosaic that really puts a positive light on the developments of the past week. Or if you want to send us a note and let us know why we're barking mad to be cheering on the election of Hitler, you can always do that by sending your message to nop@substack.com. We hope some of you will send us a note and let you know what you think. Obviously, if we get some good fodder, we'll read it on the air.
Cool.
Alrighty, folks. Have a great week.